Good morning. It's the Doug Rising Show. Well, the Doug Rising Show. Well, the Doug Rising Show. And I'm Doug Rice. I just want to hear him. How you doing? Good morning. 7 o'clock, 7:01. We're just beginning, and it's almost done. Well. Howdy, Negroes, one and all. Today, we get to watch them fall. Good gosh almighty. Wow, prophecy right in the middle of it, too. 10/20/2023. Thank you so much for tuning in to me. This is the Doug Rice Show. I am Doug Rice. I do this moved by the Holy Spirit. I'm certain that I can hear it. Every day I get up 7 a.m. and Monday morning I'll start it again. But Sunday, I'll be here at noon. No, we know that time can't be here too soon. All right, folks, this is me, the Doug Rice Show. And what do? What we do on this edifice is educate. We read. We fill the need. And, what we see is eye-opening. It's educationing. It's amazing is what it is. Today's topic, the 13th tribe by Arthur Koestler, is on my mind. And the reason I have this on my mind is because first, Mr. Koestler's publication of this publication, well, it resulted in his death, his demise. And from what I can surmise, I looked not in his eyes, but in his mind's eyes, as he wrote the 13th tribe. And this writing may have cost him his very life. Now, the 13th tribe refers to those who call themselves Jew, who are now embroiled in a melee of epic proportion over somewhere that way. And it's getting worse, folks. Other countries are getting involved. But all that's occurring is prophetic, I've resolved. I shared with everyone who could receive it a show this morning. And the topic of the show was war. It was on YouTube. It was about 18 minutes long. I'm gonna recommend it. And I got to tell you, folks, this gentleman, the guy that put this together, Benayah Israel, 18 minutes, 3 seconds of crammed in information that is very, very topical and prescient for the Negro Nation. It is a now kind of video. And it's only 18 minutes long, and I think if you watch the video, you just can't go wrong. Benayah Israel, that is the name of the YouTube channel. And the name of the video is just war. It's just got one word, war. And you've got to look at it. It puts it in its proper perspective, and it connects this to this connective, the 13th tribe. The folks that are calling themselves Israel have no connection with Israel. The folks that are calling themselves Jews, the jewels of God, the holy Hebrews, the set-apart nation, those folks are just a whole nother creation. And this gentleman, Arthur Koestler, looked into it closely, and I got to tell you, the response he got was taken most morosely. I like this. I'm just going on. I'm just free-flowing, trying to show you. Let's tell you a little bit about this man. This is the author, Arthur Koestler. Now, we've gone over this before, but this is a very current topic because these folks are going to war. And they're going to war because they're claiming to be Jews that they are not. And the rest of the nations are giving them all they've got. And I mean, it's just, there's enough to make your damn brain rot. Arthur Koestler was born in 1905 in Budapest. Though he studied science and psychology in Vienna, at the age of 20, he became a foreign correspondent. And he worked for various European newspapers in the Middle East, Paris, Berlin, Russia, and Spain. During the Civil War, which he covered from the Republican side, he was captured and imprisoned for several months by the Nationalists, but was exchanged after international protest. In 1939, 1940, he was interned in a French detention camp. After his release, due to British government intervention, he joined the French Foreign Legion, which is a hard outfit, folks. Subsequently escaped to England and joined the British Army. Like many other intellectuals in his 30s, and I got to tell you, folks, that's about the time you start thinking, right about 30 years old. Koestler saw the Soviet experiment the only hope and alternative to fascism. He became a member of the Communist Party in 1931, but left it in disillusionment during the Moscow purges of 1938. I advise all Negroes, every one of you, to study closely the Russian history. Let me tell you something about the Russian history. First, they don't hold back. They leave no mystery. They give you the good, they give you the bad, they give you the happy, they give you the sad. And the one thing about these Russians, and the one thing that they did, is the one thing that I appreciate. And it's that they had no problem punishing their own. They had no problem taking corrective measures against their own people. That, in my opinion, separates those particular Slavs from other Slavs and Huns that we see peppered about the European landscape and throughout Israel. Yes! The folks that are in Israel, the folks that are claiming to be the tribe of Judah, are nothing more than related to the Huns. They fight themselves. And it's that which educated me this morning about these beings that have handed themselves the state of Israel. They are their own people. And in juxtaposition to Russia, which itself is related to those throughout Europe, you'll have to do the study. I'm sure most of you have. What you'll find is that the Russians took the law into their own hands most brutally and exacting. They murdered a 300-year-old dynasty, the Romanovs. And they did it in a brutal fashion. They put them up against the wall and they murdered every last living royal family, to cut off what they felt was the oppression of the Russian people. In fact, it was a very, very oppressive dynasty in the end. And what happened in the end, if I might just tell you, because it's interesting, is that the Russian Tsar married a German woman. She was of German descent, a Hun. And if we could carry that further, the folks in World War II, they too were cousins. The Russian Tsars, the British royal family, the French royal family, all of them come from the same stock. But Russia had the temerity to correct themselves, and the rest of these descendants seem hesitant in every respect and everywhere. Now that we've had that small background on Russia, and I did not mean to scurry into that historical diatribe, I felt it necessary because you need to look into our enemies and our oppressors and those that are in disagreement with Negroes and the relationship we have with God Almighty closely. So that's why I did that. So let me get to it. His earlier books were mainly concerned with these experiences: the purges, the Communist Party, all of his experiences in the French Foreign Legion, all of his escape to the British government detention, all of this led to earlier books, mainly about those experiences, either in autobiographical form or in essays or political novels. Among the latter, Darkness at Noon, written by Mr. Koestler, has been translated into 33 languages. Let me stop there. 33 languages. If they translate your book into multiple languages, a book that people really want to read. Let's just go there. After World War II, World War XI, interesting. World War II, Mr. Koestler became a British citizen. And all his books since 1940 have been written in English. He now lives in London. No, he does not. But he frequently lectures at American universities. He was a fellow at the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences at Stanford in 1964, 1965. In 1968, Mr. Koestler received the Sonnen Prize, the University of Copenhagen, for his contributions to European culture. He is also a commander of the Order of the British Empire, and as well as one of the 10 companions of literature elected by the Royal Society of Literature. His works are now being republished in the collection, edited, of 20 volumes. Now, why did I want to read through that? Let me tell you why. Mr. Koestler was found dead, and the claim is apparent suicide, him and his wife in their home. Arthur Koestler found murdered, dead, claims suicide, and the reasoning behind his death is this book, this publication, what we are about to delve into right now, the truth. The truth about the 13th tribe, the truth about the Ashkenazi European converts that have been transplanted into Jerusalem as the state of Israel, in and amongst Palestinians who sold us into slavery to Esau. So they themselves are getting their recompense, the reckoning of God Almighty promised long ago. I need to make this plain. I am not on either side. I'm not on the side of Palestine. I'm not on the side of the Jews who have stolen our identity. No! Mr. Koestler wrote this book, The 13th Tribe, as a way to express the truth about what is occurring today. And what is occurring today is a bastardization of Hebrew worship, a trifecta of evil: the Catholic Church, Islamicism, and Judaistic fervor. These three religions all stolen from the worship of Hebrews so long ago as they sold us into slavery, as you all know. And Palestine was as complicit as every other country. And so the 13th tribe looks into the origins of those who fight against the Palestinians as the Palestinians fight against those, and so it goes. All right, so let's get into this. I want to look into this book. I want to see. Let's take a look. The 13th tribe, Arthur Koestler, chapter 1, the rise and fall of the Khazars. The rise and fall of the Khazars. Now look, I have done this. I've done this before, but there are just too many instances that we can't ignore. Too many things that are going back and forth. Too many jaws are hitting the floor. You know what's happening, folks. You know what's going on. We need to delve into the history. Make sure we don't leave it a mystery. The rise in Khazaria, sheep, honey, and Jews exist in large quantities. Muqaddisi Descriptio Imperi Maslemiki, 10th century, part 1. Let me see, can I? Nope. About the time of Charlemagne was crowned emperor of the West, the eastern confines of Europe between the Caucasus and the Volga were ruled by the Jewish state known as the Khazar Empire. At the peak of its power from the 7th to the 10th centuries AD, it played a significant part in shaping the destinies of medieval and consequently of modern Europe. The Byzantine Empire and historian Constantine Porphyrogentius must have been well aware of this when he recorded in his treatise on court protocol that letters addressed to the Pope in Rome and similarly those to the Emperor of the West had a gold seal worth 2 solidi attached to them, whereas messages to the king of the Khazars displayed a seal worth 3 solidi. This was not flattery, but real politic. In the period with which we are concerned, wrote Barry, it is probable that the Khan and the Khazars was of little less importance in view of the imperial foreign policy than Charles the Great and his successors. The country of the Khazars, a people of Turkish stock, occupied a strategic key position at the vital gateway between the Black Sea and the Caspian, where the great Eastern powers of the period confronted each other. It acted as a buffer, protecting Byzantium, against invasions by who? The lusty barbarian tribesmen of the northern steppes, Bulgars, Magyars, Pechenegs, etc. And later, the Vikings and the Russians. Now, folks, you need to understand, these are a tribe of people that have been at war with one another, amongst each other, and with each other for centuries. And for the most part, they have been trapped in and amongst the Caucasus Mountains, where Slavic Russian people, Khazarians, come from. And these folks that are of Turkish stock that occupied that strategic key position at that gateway between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, these powers confronted one another on a continuous basis. But it acted as a buffer. It protected Byzantium against invasions by folks that we now know as Caucasians. Let's continue. But equally, even more important, from the point of view of both, Byzantine diplomacy and of European history, is the fact that the Khazar armies effectively blocked the Arab avalanche in its most devastating early stages and thus prevented the Muslim conquest of Eastern Europe. Did you read, folks, we bring receipts here. This is the Doug Rice Show. How you doing? Welcome. What's going on today can be traced back nearly to pinpoint perfection historically as to what happened back then. The same fight is being fought. People, the same fight is being fought by the same damned people. Listen, the country of the Khazars, a people of Turkish stock, occupied a strategic key position at the vital gateway between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. That's what it needs to be said. Where the great Eastern powers of the period, what did they do? They confronted each other. Okay? And that vital gateway that they just talked about acted as a buffer, protecting Byzantium against invasions by, and they call them lusty. I don't know where that comes from, but okay. Lusty barbarian tribesmen of the northern steppes, Bulgarians. These are Europeans. Magyars, Pechenegs. And later, what are we talking about? Vikings, Nordic stock individuals, Russians, Slavs, equally, even more important from both point of view of Byzantine diplomacy and of European history is the fact that the Khazar armies, these folks that have been fighting forever, the Khazars, the Ukrainians, they are the best fighters they fight happy. Do you see these folks in the war? I've seen them in the war. These folks in Ukraine are just like their counterparts in Jerusalem. These European converts fight happy because they've been fighting for centuries. I'll read it again. The Khazar armies, effectively, what did they do? They blocked the Arab avalanche. What are the Khazar armies fighting today? The Arabs. Okay, and they prevented what? Muslim conquest of Eastern Europe. Now, folks, we bring receipts here. This fight that they're fighting now is nothing more than an extension of the fight they fought back then. And it's a fight that they started fighting when they started moving Negroes, Hebrews, off their square. Do you understand that? They sold us out of position. And the whole world has been in turmoil ever since. The entire earth has been off balance. It's all, listen, one segment is playing a high version of chess, and the other segment is playing a low version of checkers. Actually, one version is playing a low version of chess, and the other version is playing a high version of checkers. That's a much better way to look at it. All right, so Professor Dunlap of Columbia University, a leading authority on the history of the Khazars. Now, understand what we just said. Professor Dunlap, okay, who is a leading authority on the history of the Khazars, the people that call themselves Jews, the people that are now in both Ukraine and fighting both in Ukraine and Jerusalem. And I think we all need to think of that as a people, that the same people are fighting in two different places, claiming to be different people with the same faces. What? Look at them. So we got to fight in Ukraine. Those are Khazars. We got to fight in the state of Israel. Those are Khazars. And now we've got a professor, okay, at Columbia University, a leading authority on the history of Khazars, that gives a concise summary of this divisive yet virtually unknown episode. Let us read together. The Khazar country lay across the natural line of advance of the Arabs. Within a few years of the death of Muhammad, the armies of the Caliphate, sweeping northward through the wreckage of two armies and carrying all before them, reached the great barrier mountain of the Caucasus. I'm going to read that again because I did transpose that. The Khazar country lay across the natural line of advance of the Arabs. Negroes, please share this so you know that what's going on today is just a continuation of what's been going on since AD 630, since AD 630, 632 damned years before the Common Era. These fools have been fighting one another. Again, this comes from Professor Dunlap at where? Columbia University. Here we go. The Khazar country lay across the natural line of advance of the Arabs. Within a few years of the death of Muhammad, the armies of the Caliphate, sweeping northward through the wreckage of two armies and carrying all of them, reached the great mountain barrier of the white folks, the Caucasus. This barrier, once passed, the road lay open to the lands of Eastern Europe. As it was on the line of the Caucasus, the Arabs met the forces of an organized military power, which effectively prevented them from extending their conquests in this direction. Are you listening? The wars of the Arabs and the Khazars, which lasted more than 100 damn years, though little known, have thus considerable historical importance. You damned right it does. The Franks of Charles Martel on the field of Tours turned the tide of Arab invasion. At about the same time, the threat to Europe and the East was hardly less acute. The victorious Muslims were met and held by the forces of the Khazar kingdom. It can scarcely be doubted that before the existence of the Khazars in the region north of the Caucasus, Byzantium, the bulwark of European civilization in the East, would have found itself outflanked by the Arabs, and the history of Christendom and Islam might well have been very different from what we know. Folks, are you listening? This is the Doug Rice Show. We bring receipts. Now, y'all need to hear this. Now, let us frame this juxtaposed to what we are seeing today by those who call themselves true Israel. Those set apart of God Almighty that seem to be having a hard time of it day and nightly. They just seem to be just fighting off attack after attack after attack after attack. And look at that. The whole thing's whack. They're not even who they claim to be. And they have been fighting endlessly by God Almighty. They've been fighting the same damned people. It's the same damn fight. My God. And to that, a good night. No, I'm just kidding. I ain't going nowhere. That's amazing. Folks, you cannot leave this show unfazed. You can't. This is amazing information. And again, if you really wish to show your support, and I hope you do, I would hope that you give to the new patron account of the Doug Rice Show. Got a new patron account, patreon.com/the Doug Rice. Got a $5 a month patron level. I am going to start doing some extensive writing and share with you some of the things that I write, some of the things I dare not share out there. I write, I'm a writer, I'm an orator, I speak, public speaker. I'm not a preacher per se, and I'm certainly not a spiritual leader, okay? You go to TL Ministries or Brother Dante Fortson for your spiritual nourishment. What I'm here to do is show you the facts and bring you receipts. And if you would, please support us. Oh, please. Okay, we'll just continue. I feel Detrina going, will you please stop and move on? I'm moving on, Detrina. Oh, yes, ma'am. Got to pay her too, you know, folks. Send me some money so I can pay Detrina. Thank you. So this was a very interesting paragraph, and it frames into focus for us what we are now presently feeling. This bit of information should leave you mentally reeling. And I'll tell you why, because they'll try to deny. They will not show this information, and I can see why Mr. Koestler went bye-bye. I can see why all of this really was amiss for them. I can see it. But let's just continue. It is perhaps not surprising, given these circumstances, that in 732, after a resounding Khazar victory over the Arabs, the future Emperor Constantine V married a Khazar princess. In due time, their son became the Emperor Leo IV, known as Leo the Khazar. Now, did you know that? Did you know that these people have been intermarrying, interwarring? Have you? I had no doubt. I had no idea. Ironically, the last battle in the war, AD 737, ended in a Khazar defeat. But by that time, the impetus of the Muslim Holy War was spent. The caliphate was rocked by internal dissensions, and the Arab invaders retraced their steps across the Caucasus Mountains without having gained a permanent foothold in the north, whereas the Khazars became more powerful than they had previously been. Interesting. So, what do we know? The Khazarian Empire became even a greater empire, defeating the Arabs that they still fight today under the guise of being Jews. Well, what can I say? A few years later, probably AD 740, the king, his court, and the military ruling class embraced the Jewish faith. And Judaism became the state religion of the Khazars. Now we have it within our grasp to understand at last what happened to our past. No doubt their contemporaries were as astonished by this decision as modern scholars were when they came across the evidence in the Arab, Byzantine, Russian, and Hebrew sources. One of the most recent comments is to be found in a work by the Hungarian Marxist historian Dr. Antal Bertha. His book on the Magyar society in the 8th and 9th centuries has several chapters on the Khazars, as during most of that period, the Hungarians were ruled by them. Yet, their conversion to Judaism is discussed in a single paragraph with obvious embarrassment. Are you reading this? Well, I am. Our investigations cannot go into problems pertaining to the history of ideas, but we must call the leaders or readers' attention to the matter of the Khazars' kingdom's state religion. It was the Jewish faith which became the official religion of the ruling strata of society. Needless to say, the acceptance of the Jewish faith as the state religion of an ethnically non-Jewish people could be the subject of interesting speculation. We shall, however, confine ourselves to the remark that this official conversion, in defiance of Christian proselytizing by Byzantium, the Muslim influence from the East, and in spite of the political pressure of these two powers to a religion which had no support from any political power, but was persecuted by nearly all, has come as a surprise to all historians concerning the Khazars, and cannot be considered as accidental, but must be regarded as a sign of the independent policy pursued by that kingdom. Folks, share this live. Stop what you're doing. Share this live on every platform that you have. Share this live, like, subscribe, share, all of that. We are getting the details. We are obtaining the receipts. It's coming out of their very own mouths. It's nearly complete. No, we're nowhere near. It's 99 pages. But listen, the 13th tribe. The only fix is a fix they will not apply. They've got to look Negroes like you and me right in the eye. And you know what they got to say. You know what they have to admit. And you know what? They might as well get to it. I'm moving on. Here we go. On with the show. Which leaves us only slightly more bewildered than before. Yet, whereas the sources differ in minor, major facts are beyond dispute. What is in dispute is the fate of the Jewish Khazars after the destruction of their empire. In the 12th century or 13th century, on this problem, the sources are scant. But various late medieval Khazar settlements are mentioned in the Crimea, in the Ukraine, in Hungary, Poland, and Lithuania. Are you reading this with me, folks? Where did these people come from? Where did these people come from? Well, they came from right there. What? They came from right there. Listen, they're fighting themselves to a frenzy, shaking their fists in the air, and these idiots don't even realize they came from right there. What are you doing? You know, why don't you ask Negroes a thing or two? I don't know. Some of us might know a thing. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I'm back at it. I'm just saying, what is going on? The general picture that emerges from these fragmentary pieces of information is that a migration of Khazar tribes and communities into these regions of Eastern Europe, mainly Russia and Poland, where at the dawn of the Middle Age, the greatest concentration of Jews were found. What are we talking about here, folks? Who are these people? They're not us. They're not Jews. They're Jewish. They're somewhat Jews. They're not, but they're Europeans. This is what I'm saying. I don't know. This has led several historians to conjecture that a substantial part, and perhaps the majority of Eastern Jews, and hence world of Jewry, might be of Khazar and not of Semitic origin. Well now, what do we have here? A little more truth at you. Share this, like this, subscribe this, hit that notification bell, tell your friends what the hell. The far-reaching implications of this hypothesis may explain the great caution exercised by historians in approaching this subject, if they do not avoid it altogether. Thus, in the 1973 edition of the Encyclopedia Judaica, the article Khazars is signed by Dunlap, but there's a separate section dealing with Khazar Jews after the fall of the kingdom, signed by the editors and written with the obvious intent to avoid upsetting believers in the dogma of the chosen race. Dear God, you mean they put it right in our face? The Turkish-speaking Khazars, a fundamentalist Jewish sect of the Crimea of Poland, and elsewhere have affirmed a connection with the Khazars, which is perhaps confirmed by evidence from folklore and anthropology as well as language. There seems to be a considerable amount of evidence attesting to the continued presence in European of descendants of the Khazars. Yeah, Khazars. We heard of them. Yeah, well, I don't know. We heard of the what? Huh? Khazar, what? How important in quantitative terms is that presence of the Caucasian sons of Japheth in the tents of Shem? One of the most radical propounders of the hypothesis concerning Khazar origins of Jewry is professor of medieval Jewish history at Tel Aviv University. His book, Khazaria, says this: a new approach both to the problem of the relations between the Khazar Jewry and other Jewish communities, and to the question of how far we can go in regarding this Khazar Jewry as the nucleus of the large Jewish settlement in Eastern Europe. The descendants of this settlement, those who stayed where they were, those who immigrated to the United States and to other countries, and those who went to Israel, constitute now the large majority of world Jewry. In other words, the people that are over in Israel claiming to be Jews are not Jews, but are Jewish converts and Europeans that do not descend from Shem. They descend from Japheth. They're fighting a war where they don't goddamn belong. And you know who they're fighting? They're fighting the very Arabs they've been fighting since before this all existed. 730 BCE, what? And you know what? They don't want you to know this, folks. They don't want you to understand that these same people have been fighting over the same land. You know, the same blood spilled in the same sand. Okay, I'll stop. Sorry. This and before the full extent of the Holocaust was known. But that does not alter the fact that the large majority of surviving Jews in the world is of Eastern European and thus perhaps mainly of Khazar origin. Shout it to the rooftops. If so, this would mean that their ancestors, came not from the Jordan, but from the Volga. Not from Canaan, but from the Caucasus, once believed to be the cradle of the Aryan race, and that genetically they are more closely related to the Hun, Uighur, and Magyar tribes than to the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, maybe you don't understand what's going on here. Maybe you don't understand the gravitas of the goddamn situation. They're killing thousands of people to hold on to a position they have no right to claim in the first place. And the very people who have claim to that position, they've sold into slavery. And here's the proof, written by one of their own, one that they murdered for writing it. Share this, like this, subscribe. For God's sake, folks, support the effort. This is how I stay alive now. I got no other source of income other than this. So if you don't mind, your ass I'm gonna kiss. Please give to the edifices below and use patreon.com, The Doug Rice Show. Or you can use Cash App too. Okay, let's go. Should this turn out to be the case, then the term anti-Semitism would become void of meaning based on a misapprehension shared by both the killers and their victims. The story of the Khazar Empire, as it slowly emerges from the past, begins to look like the most cruel hoax which history has ever perpetrated. My God, people. They're over there killing each other for nothing. They're over there killing each other, making claims to fame that they have no claim to make. And it's a hell of a tragedy, for goodness sake. Part 2. Yeah, we're going to continue. Attila was, after all, merely the king of all kingdom of tents. His state passed away, whereas the despised city of Constantinople remained a power. The tents vanished. The towns remained. The Hun state was a whirlwind. You know, I keep using the word Hun. It perfectly describes these people that are warring against one another. They are a warlike group and have been such for centuries. Thus Castle, a 19th century Orientalist, implying that the Khazars shared, for similar reasons, a similar fate. Yet the Hun presence on the European scene lasted a mere 80 years. In circa 3072, when the Huns first started to move westward from the steeps north of the Caspian to the death of Attila in 453, whereas the kingdom of Khazars held its own for the best part of 4 centuries, they too lived chiefly in tents. But they also had large urban settlements, and were in the process of transformation from a tribe of nomadic warriors into a nation of farmers, cattle breeders, fishermen, vine growers, traders, and skilled craftsmen. Soviet archaeologists have unearthed evidence for a relatively advanced civilization which was altogether different from the Hun whirlwind. They found the traces of villages extending over several miles, with houses connected by galleries to huge cattle sheds, sheep pens, and stables. Don't want to read all that nonsense, the measurements. Some remaining ox plows showed remarkable craftsmanship. So did the preserved artifacts, buckles, clasps, ornamental saddle plates. Of particular interests were the foundations sunk into the ground of houses built in a circular shape. According to the Soviet archaeologists, these were found all over the territories inhabited by the Khazars and were an earlier date than their normal rectangular buildings. Obviously, the round houses symbolize the transition from portable dome-shaped tents to permanent dwellings, from nomadic to be a settled or rather semi-settled existence. For the contemporary Arab sources tell us that the Khazars only stayed in their towns, including even their capital, Ito, During the winter, coming spring, they packed their tents, left their houses, and sallied forth with their sheep or cattle into the steppes or camped in the cornfields or vineyards. The excavations also showed that the kingdom was, during its later period, surrounded by an elaborate chain of fortifications, dating from the 8th and 9th centuries, which protected its northern frontiers facing the open steppes. Now, these fortresses formed a rough semicircular arc from the Crimea, which the Khazars ruled from a time, across the lower regions of the Donets and the Don to the Volga, while towards the south, they were protected by the Caucasus, to the west by the Black Sea, to the east by the Khazar Sea, the Caspian. To this day, Muslims, recalling the Arab terror of the Khazar raids, still call the Caspian a sea as shifting as the nomads and washing to their steeped land parts. However, the northern chains of fortifications marked merely an inner ring, protecting the stable core of the Khazar country. The actual boundaries of their rule over the tribes of the north fluctuated according to the fortunes of war. At the peak of their power, they controlled or exacted tribute from the same 30 different nations and tribes, inhabiting the vast territories between the Caucasus, the Aral Sea, the Ural Mountains, the town of Kiev, and the Ukrainian steppes. People under Khazar suzerainty included the Bulgarians, the Burtas, the Guz, the Magyars, the Hungarians, the Gothic and Greek colonies of the Crimea, and the Slavonic tribes of the northwestern woodlands. Beyond these extended dominions, Khazar armies also raided Georgia and Armenia and penetrated into the Arab Caliphate as far as Mosul. Folks, what are we finding out about these people calling themselves Jews? What are we finding about these Khazar converts? The Arabs have been fighting these people for centuries, and the Arabs know that they are not true Israel. They have a history with these people that predate their conversion. I mean, the Arabs got a right to call the Jews anything else but Jews because they've known them since before they converted. Before that, they were considered a nomadic tribe of heathens, pagan worshipers. The Ukrainians stem from the Khazarians, who now claim themselves to be Jews, were pagan worshiping people that have been fighting Arabs for centuries. They were fighting Arabs before they called themselves Jews, folks. Now, you got to know that's some incredible news, folks. They converted to Judaism, and these folks looked at them like, what are you doing? You're not Jews. You're just going to convert to we don't like Jews. We're enslaved Jews. Their God is strong, and they're Negroes. They don't look like you. So what the hell are you doing trying to be a Jew? We got the receipts. We understand these people are not who they claim to be. And they've been fighting each other for centuries. Somebody need to stop these people for a minute. Hey, man, we know the story. Y'all need to stop with all this gory nonsense because it don't make sense. You're fighting over something that's a lie that was put in play by the sale of true Israel to get them out of the way. So let us continue, because we got a little bit more to go. All right, so I believe I was here. The people under Khazarian suzerainty, right there, boom, 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 boom. There it is. In the words of the Soviet archaeologist M.I. Artomonov, until the 9th century, the Khazars had no rivals to their supremacy in the regions north of the Black Sea and the adjoining steppe and forest regions of the Dnieper. The Khazars were the supreme masters of the southern half of Eastern Europe for a century and a half and presented a mighty bulwark blocking the Ural-Caspian gateway from Asia to Europe. During this whole period, they held back the onslaught of nomadic tribes from the east, folks. Now look, taking a bird's eye view of the history of the great nomadic empires of the east, the Khazar kingdoms occupies an intermediary position in a time, size, and degree of civilization between the Hun and the Avar empires, which preceded, and the Mongol empire that succeeded it. Man, you got to be a smart cookie to try to absorb this. Very, very interesting. Listen to that last paragraph. We're going to go over it again. Okay, so we don't mix apples and oranges, because I know I've done that and I don't want to just leave it like that. Here we go. Taking a bird's eye view of the history of the great nomadic empires of the East. These are the great nomadic wanderers. They're settlers. What do? They occupy, they absorb civilizations, right? They procure, our essences. They're essence collectors. That they're vampires, So these nomadic, vampiric individuals, great nomadic empires, Khazar kingdom occupies an intermediary position. In other words, they came between, in time, size, and degree of civilization, between the Hun civilizations and the Avar empires, which preceded, and then the Mongol empires that succeeded, because we all know, if we don't, Khazar was defeated by the Prince of Ukraine. Okay? All right, let's continue. Do you understand I'm only on page 6 of 99? Let's see what else we'll find. Part 3. But who were these remarkable people? Remarkable as much as by their power and achievements as by their conversion to a religion of outcasts. They converted to a religion of outcasts and a religion of Negroes. The descriptions that have come down to us originate in hostile sources and cannot be taken at face value. As to the Khazars, an Arab chronicle writes, they are to the north, and the inhabited earth towards the 7th clime have over their heads the constellation of the plow. Their land is cold and wet. Accordingly, their complexions are white, their eyes blue, their hair flowing and predominantly reddish, their bodies large, and their natures cold. Their general aspect is wild. Now, when I look at a bunch of Trump supporters, all blonde-haired, blue-eyed, screaming animalistic edifications of caucasity, it does bring to mind that descriptive. After a century of warfare, the Arab writer obviously had no great sympathy for the Khazars, nor have the Georgian or Armenian scribes, whose countries of a much older nature had been repeatedly devastated by Khazar horsemen. A Georgian chronicle echoing an ancient tradition identifies them with the hosts of who? Gog and Magog, wild men with hideous faces, in the manner of wild beasts, eaters of blood. What are they claiming to do these days? What is that they do with the blood these days, folks? Huh? I've heard them talk about eating blood. Let's move on. An Armenian writer refers to the horrible multitude of Khazars with insolent, broad, lashless faces and long falling hair like women. Lastly, the Arab geographer Istakari, one of the main Arab sources, this to say: the Khazars do not resemble the Turks. They are black-haired and are of two kinds. One called the Kara Khazars, black Khazars, who are swarthy, verging on deep black, as if they were a kind of Indian, and a white kind, Ak Khazars, who are strikingly handsome. Are we getting the receipts? This is more flattering, but only adds to the confusion, for it was customary among Turkish people to refer to the ruling classes or clans as white, to the lower strata as black. Thus, there's no reason to believe that the white Bulgars were whiter than the black Bulgars, or that the white Huns, the Ephthalites, who invaded India and Persia in the 5th and 6th century, were of fairer skin than the other Hun tribes which invaded Europe. Istakari's black-skinned Khazars, as much else in his and his colleagues' writings, were based on hearsay and legend. But we are none the wiser regarding the Khazars' physical appearance or their ethnic origin. The last question can only be answered in a vague and general way. But it is equally frustrating to inquire into the origins of the Huns, Alans, Avars, Bulgars, Magyars, Bishkirs, Burtas, Sabirs, Ugirs, Saragors, Onagors, Udagors, Kirkirgors, Taraniaks, Kotragors, Khazars, Zebenders, Pechenegs, Guz, Cumans, Kachaps, and dozens of other tribes of people who at one time or another in their lifetime of the Khazar kingdom passed through the turnstiles of those migratory playgrounds. Even the Huns, of whom we know much more, are of uncertain origin. Their name is apparently derived from the Chinese Hingnu, which designates warlike nomads in general, while other nations applied the name Hun in a similarly indiscriminate way to nomadic hordes of all kinds, including the white Huns mentioned above, the Sabirs, Magyars, and Khazars. It is amusing to note that while the British in World War I used the term Hun in the same pejorative sense, in my native Hungary, school children were taught to look up to our glorious Hun fathers with patriotic pride. An exclusive rowing club in Budapest was called Hunya, and Attilia is still a popular first name. So let me stop for a moment, whoa, right there, for a moment. When I refer to all of them as Huns, this is too where I get the reference that Huns include Germans, Huns include anybody who is a warlike creature. And it can be kind of considered that Khazars, the white Huns, as it said, who invaded India, Persia, were often fairer skinned than the other Hun tribes which invaded Europe. So even Huns could be associated with Khazars, in my estimation, but it's a designation. We'll just keep it moving. All right. In the 1st century AD, the Chinese drove these disagreeable Hun neighbors westward, and thus started one of those periodic avalanches which swept for centuries from Asia toward the West. From the 5th century onward, many of these westward bound tribes were called by the genetic name of Turks. Pay attention. The term is also supposed to be of Chinese origin, apparently derived from the name of a hill, and was subsequently used to refer to all tribes who spoke languages with certain common characteristics. The Turk language group. Thus, the term Turk, in the sense in which it was used by medieval writers, and often also by modern ethnologists, refers primarily to language and not to race. Very important we understand that. Very important we understand that. In this sense, the Huns and Khazars were Turkic people. Now you understand even my reference and referring them as Huns. When I say they're Huns, I mean they're warlike, violent, dangerous people. And you're going to find, if you haven't already, you look over in Israel what they're doing to the same Palestinians that sold us to Esau, Edom. They're lighting them up. They're vicious individuals, but they're scared to go in. They're scared of losses. That's their sin. God hates a coward. Anyway, all right, so the Khazar, thus the term Turk, but not Magyars. In this sense, the Huns and Khazars were Turkic people. but not the Magyars, whose language belongs to the Finno-Ugrian language group. The Khazar language, supposedly a Chuvash dialect of Turkish, which still survives in the autonomous Chuvash Soviet Republic between the Volga and the Sura. The Chuvash people are actually believed to be the descendants of the Bulgars, and who spoke a dialect similar to the Khazars. But all these connections are rather tenuous, based on the more or less speculative deductions of Oriental philologists. All we can say with safety is that the Khazar were a Turkic tribe who erupted from the Asian steppes, probably in the 5th century of our era. The origin of the name Khazar and the modern derivations to which it gave rise has also been the subject of much ingenious speculation. Most likely the word is derived from the Turkish root gaz, to wander, and simply means nomad. All right, so what have these Jews been doing all over Europe? Wandering, nomadic. They stem from nomadic people that kind of switched back and forth, almost like, snowbirds here in Arizona, they leave during the summer, come back during the winter. It seems like they developed that, but everywhere they went, it seems they affected the populace. They affected the indigenous population, and they were of such a great number, they staved off the Arab invasion of the northern empires of Europe. And during that struggle, they became an even greater group, absorbing other groups, languages. Then they converted to Judaism, to the shock and awe of Muslims, to the bereavement of the Catholics, who were like, damn, I thought we might get the Khazars on our side. And so the entire Khazarian kingdom converted to Judaism. And the world watched and said, what the hell are y'all doing? Y'all are nomads. You're not Hebrews, but they did it anyway. But you see, that was the beginning of the hijack. You understand? Slavery was already in full force. They didn't like Negroes. The tide was turning. People were starting to read the Bible, and they're reading it today. And the truth of who these people are is coming out, and they can't stop it. Okay, let's get back to it. One of greater interest to the non-speculist are some alleged modern derivations from it. Among them, the Russian Cossack and the Hungarian Hussar, both signifying martial horsemen. Hussar is probably derived from the Serbo code, from the Greek reference to Khazars, and also the German Ketzer, heretic, Jew. If these derivations are correct, they would show that the Khazars had a considerable impact on the imagination of a variety of peoples in the Middle Ages. Well, folks, and who's there in Israel? Who is that in Israel? Who are these people? Because they're not who they claim to be. They're claiming to be people that come from you and me. And it's a perversion. The reason I call it a perversion because they became Jews by conversion. All right, folks, we're gonna cover chapter 1, part 2 a little bit later, perhaps in the day. There are certainly a lot more things that I have to say, unless perhaps I should just continue. But no, I'm going to give myself a break and come back and do chapter 2, for goodness sake. I do appreciate your attention to this, the 13th Tribe by Arthur Koestler. While I mention, listen, I try to do about an hour show. I don't want to overload the system. You guys got a lot to think about. And I think we made a lot of points and didn't miss them. All right, there we go. We're good. I'll land there. Hey, I need your help. I do. I need you to support this effort so that the effort can continue. Without your effort, I will not be able to do so. And so if you love looking at the Doug Rice Show, use the giving links you see below, and I will give you PDFs in return, just so you know. All right, folks, we also have a great sponsor, and he is a good sponsor. The sponsor is Twidware. Twidware is some really quality stuff. In fact, thought I'd mention while I'm sitting here even talking, I'm going to have Twid on the show. I'm going to have him on the show. He's going to tell his story. I'm going to try to move some business his way. That is our sponsor, folks. I only got one sponsor and you to support the Doug Rice Show. So what am I going to do? I'm going to ask you to go to twidware.com. Twidware.com. The sporting athletic gear is of great value, high quality, affordably priced. And if you use TDRS, that stands for me, Doug Rice. If you use that, the promo code, you're going to get 10% off just for looking at the show. I appreciate if you would, because I like this stuff. It's really good. He's also Twid Skincare coming out. It's a new line. It's going to be Twid everything. It's all going to be Twid mind. Okay, there we go. That's about it. That's the Doug Rice. I appreciate everyone showing up. And again, support this effort. Please support this effort. Become a monthly patron supporter. And I'm going to do some writing, maybe do some shows that others won't see. Who knows? I'll put that up there. If you have anything else, hey, you guys can write me at thedougrice@gmail.com. Request any PDFs if you wish. And that'll be it. I think that's the dish. All right, folks, that's it. I got to go. Hey, you guys have a wonderful day. It's Friday. One more day. The weekend should be interesting. They are gearing up for war. And God only knows what we have in store. But as long as you have been repentant, and as long as you keep your eye on the Most High, I do believe you might get by. All right, folks, I got to go. That's the Doug Rice Show. You have a wonderful day. That's all I got to say. Bye-bye. What? Hey, shit, damn it. Always forget, look, folks, this ain't a joke. Don't be out there smiling in front of these folks, man. Don't do that. Ain't nothing funny, that's first. And they expect your black ass to be supporting Israel. And if they haven't, Lamont Hill has just put it in the faces of people everywhere. Somehow all Negroes are supporting Palestine. If you are woke, you know that both are not what you need to support, okay? And if you got to go out there in public places, do me a favor, will you? Get that goddamn grin off your faces. I knew I'd fit it in. I gotta go now.